The Man Everybody Was Afraid of, a Dave Brandstetter mystery. Book 4 in the series. Author Joseph Hansen. Publisher Open Road Integrated Media, New York. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 16. On a Sangre de Cristo side street, an orange rubbish truck opened steel jaws and a youth in orange coveralls heaved bulging green plastic bags of trash between the jaws from a grassy curb. Dave stopped the rental car. In hard, late afternoon sun glare, Cecil blinked at him. "You don't make it easy not to ask questions." Dave grinned. "You look great in that hat." It was yellow with a broad brim tilted up on one side and a fluffy cerise plume. Dave had bought it for him in Los Angeles, not far from the glass police building, 4 hours and 28 minutes ago. Dave flicked the brim of the hat with a finger, opened the car door, and got out. The youth in orange coveralls used a clumsily gloved hand to yank down a lever at the side of the truck. Machinery whined. The steel jaws groaned close. There was crunching and grinding. The youth gave a shrill whistle. The trunk lumbered on. He jogged after it. Dave stepped out quickly and caught a greasy sleeve. "May I ask you a question?" The boy stopped and tilted his head. "About politics? About products?" "About these trucks," Dave said. How many are there? How many of you work them?" "2 trucks, 4 of us." The boy was gold-skinned, blue-eyed, and well-spoken. He should have been playing badminton on a private beach in Malibu. "Except sometimes, like today. Today, one of the trucks has its insides all over the garage floor." He checked a watch on a grimy wrist. It was an expensive watch. "Means the 2 of us have to cover 2 whole districts. That's why we're out so late." "When do you study for exams?" Dave asked. "On my off days," the boy said. "This is a good job. There's a long waiting list for this job. Normally it's only 5-6 hours, 2-3 days a week." From the high cab of the truck, another blond youth stuck his head. "Come on, Kevin!" The diesel revved impatiently. Kevin waved a glove. "What'd you want to know?" "Whether you remember picking up a charred gasoline can about 2 weeks ago on Chola Street." The boy in the truck blasted on its horn. "I'm coming," Kevin called. "Yeah, not me, Paul. It had a police department stencil. Didn't look any good anymore, but we turned it over to them anyway." Cecil came up. Dave asked him, "Do you know her exact address?" 241, Cecil said. "Along there, somewhere," the boy frowned. "Who are you?" "Insurance." Dave stuck a card into a pocket of the orange coveralls. "It's evidence in an arson case." The diesel horn shouted down the street again. Dogs began to bark. Kevin ran for the next stack of trash. News, or what Channel 10 chose to see as news, kept happening. It was close to 6 o'clock. The side room in the cinderblock building on top of the mountain was noisy again with typewriters and teletypes, and foggy with cigarette smoke. The gale force air conditioning couldn't cope with. Telephones rang. High shoulders held receivers to mouths and ears, while pencils scribbled on yellow pads. No one paid any attention to Dave and Cecil when they edged their way between the desks. Daisy Flynn was marking copy again with the black felt tip pen. She didn't see them either. Not right away. When she did, she yanked off her glasses and glared at Cecil. "Where the hell have you been?" "They stole my film, didn't they?" Cecil said. "You were supposed to be here at 5 this morning with an interview tape," she said. "What? Oh, yes, they stole your film." She turned Dave a sour green stare. "They're everywhere, aren't they? The tentacles of a great insurance corporation." She looked at Cecil again. "What are you doing with him?" "As Scoop Harris of the Hoof and Mouth Bureau," Cecil said. "Nothing. As Cecil Harris, first grader, I'm learning the alphabet. But slowly." "I don't know what you're jabbering about." She fiddled irritably with her digital watch again. "But you are up to your afro in trouble around here." She scrambled papers together off the desk. "Naturally, I telephoned your school. They couldn't find you either, which didn't make them happy. They phoned your home in San Francisco." She got to her feet. Your other brother then got on the horn to me, and if you think I'm overreacting, wait until he gets to you. I brought everything back, Cecil said. Video and audio. They're outside in my van. We'll sort you out later, she said. One torn and bleeding limb at a time. Meanwhile, I have a newscast to do. She started off. Dave stepped in front of her. Give your sidekicks a chance for once. You and I need to talk. She looked him up and down sharply. What about? You mean I get that interview? She laid down her script and pulled open a desk drawer. Channel 10's news desk learns at last what you're doing in the Ben Orton case and why. You're kidding, Dave said. You didn't turn Cecil loose on me for Channel 10's news desk. You turned him loose to keep me from getting my job done. I didn't turn him loose. She took her little white cassette recorder out of the drawer. I simply didn't try to stop him. Why wouldn't I want you to get your job done? That's what we need to talk about, Dave said. But I don't think you'll want that. He touched the cold little box. Because the subject isn't going to be my part in the Ben Orton case. It's going to be yours. She stiffened. What do you mean? You don't want me to say it here. Dave glanced at the desk that crowded close, the busy staffers at the desk. Shall we step outdoors? I'm stepping onto the studio. She dropped the recorder back and slammed the door. She snatched up her script. You don't know what you're talking about. She walked off. He went after her. I'm talking about a fire-blackened gasoline can marked La Calita Police picked up by the trash collectors around Monday, the 19th, at your address. She halted. He couldn't tell whether she was pale or not. Her makeup was too thick, but the green eyes that stared at him through a fringe of false lashes were suddenly dull. So was her voice. Wait a minute, she said, and pushed out the door into the hallway. Cecil looked grave and afraid. Dave gave him a one-cornered smile and watched the red hand of a clock on the wall. It wasn't a minute till she was back with an outscript. Come on, she said. She came to a stop on the packed open ground beyond the cars that angled in a row against the blank wall of the building, whose gray, the dropping sun, turned copper color. There was silence. The sky was beginning to go green. The hawk hung in it again, high and almost motionless. Now, what's this about? She tried to be defiant. You came out here, Dave said. You tell me. I came out here, she snapped, because you are talking dangerous nonsense and I wanted to stop. What was dangerous, Dave said, was your being at Ben Orton's the day and hour he was killed. You're out of your mind, she said it with energy and contempt, but her long red nails were digging into her palms. What would I be doing there? I've got a couple of answers, Dave said, but I'd rather have them from you. I wasn't there, she said. Who told you I was? You know that, Dave said. Lester Green. Lester. Her voice failed. She wavered on her legs. A bony hand groped out for support. It was Cecil's arm, she found. But Lester Green is in prison. He was out that day, Dave said. He wanted to see Ben Orton, but he got there too late. Orton was dead. Lester lost his head and ran, but at the top of the hill, he looked back and saw you in the patio with a charred gasoline can in your hand. You know he saw you. You saw him. She looked away at the shadows gathering in the folds of the hills. She breathed in deeply, shoulders rising and dropping. She turned Dave a weary, defenseless look. She nodded. I saw him. Her smile was thin and ironic. I thought he was a workman clearing brush the way they do when it gets dry like this, against fires. Because he was black, Cecil said. Well, you're wrong around here. It's white middle-class boys get the nigger jobs. I forgot. She let go of him, crossed that head-hard pan on wobbly hills, and leaned back against a very small car. The sun struck into her eyes. She shaded them with a hand. Do you know, she asked Dave, who Eddie Sushak was? He published an underground paper in La Calita, Dave said, until he got burned out, which is where the gasoline can fits in, right? I was on vacation that month, she said, but the police told our crew it was the wiring. His printing equipment was too much for it. The building was old and run down. And you wrote for him, Dave said. Not for long, she answered grimly. But it did feel nice. Freedom. She smiled to herself a second, then squinted up at him. May I have a cigarette? Dave held out his pack. Her hand shook, but she managed to slip a cigarette out. Then she dropped it. Cecil picked it up and handed it to her, and Dave lit it for her. The air was still and the smoke hung in it. She said, I believed it about the wiring until 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks. Yes. When Sushek died, Dave said, in a veterans hospital up the coast. Things go wrong with the kidneys, she said. When they're confined to wheelchairs, kidneys, I don't know, something inside, unless they get regular therapy, and he wouldn't stay still for it. But it wasn't only that. He was angry all the time. Stupid wars, greedy corporations, corrupt politics. Everything out there. She nodded vaguely toward the town below and its bowl of brown hills. It depends on who you are, but he was a very delicate mechanism, not put together to stand it. And then there was... She broke off. The fingers of a hanging hand had strayed to the car's license plate and were uselessly tracing the numbers. She looked down at them. Her voice held pity and rage. He wanted to make love. He couldn't, which was pathetic. And he couldn't bear being pathetic. She looked up again, tears in her eyes. It wasn't paralysis that killed him. It was bitterness. And you don't think anymore that it was faulty wiring that burned down his paper? Dave said. He brought me the can, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine and an envelope. Not here. To my apartment. He left them on the service porch. I suppose it was that same night, to be opened in the event of my death. That's what he'd written on them. I didn't know what it meant, why he'd left whatever they were with me. We hadn't spoken in months. She looked at Dave with winter in her face. I expect you know why. He said he wasn't a man. Her soundless laugh was tender and derisive. He was 10 times the man Ben Orton ever was. But he ran from Ben Orton, Dave said. Didn't we all? She shrugged, dropped the cigarette, stepped on it. Anyway, it was a day or two after he died that I remembered the package and the envelope. And in the package, Dave said, was the gasoline can left behind by whichever of Ben Orton's boys likes to play with matches, so there'd be no mistake in Sushek's mind about who burned him out and why. And in the envelope was a Xerox of the marriage license made out to Anita Orton and Lester Green, along with Sushek's story of the tie between the license and Lester's arrest. And the fire, she nodded, written in pencil. His typewriter was at the paper, she sighed, pushing away from the little car, dusted her hands together. So I took the can and the envelope in a lot of rage and drove up to Ben Orton's. I was going to put the story on the air, but I wanted to confront him with it first, to see his face. Only when I saw it, it was surprised at something else. The last thing that would ever surprise it. You went in through the patio, Dave said. It was wet, she said. I had an old habit of going in that way, from years before. Her glance flickered away, flickered back. And there he lay in his own pig blood, with his little pig gun in his hand. I was too angry to be sick. I stood over him and gave the speech. I'd worked up on my way there in the car. Her laugh at herself was harsh and despairing, as if he could hear me dead when he never once heard me alive. I started to leave the study the way I'd come, and the patio gate squeaked. I ran into the bathroom and locked the door. Someone came into the study, and I just stood there, trembling, praying for him to go away. Whoever they were, and they did. You should have given him more time, Dave said. Look, there was a phone there. You knew what to do. She sucked in her cheeks and shook her head at him. Not a chance. Louise Orton's deepest longing for 25 years has been to punish me. I thought she'd killed him. I still think so. For flaunting that art gallery woman, Windrow, in her face, bringing her right into La Calida. What about Curly? Lester says his tote bag wasn't by the body. You knew that, and you still said nothing. That was why I was pleased when you showed up. You might be able to save him. I couldn't. Not without taking his place. I was seen. That didn't worry you, Dave said. That was only some workmen burning weeds. I don't mean by him, she said. When I got to the foot of Orton's Road in my car, another car was standing there. A 1928 Rolls Royce. The only one of its kind in this part of the world. Richard T. Knowles. And he was in it. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.